Ashton here from MyCanMed, and welcome to this video where we're going to go through and dissect Section 1, Verbal Reasoning. Okay, now verbal reasoning is the toughest section in all of the UCAT. It might seem pretty easy and pretty straightforward, but it is the worst performing section by far. Okay, so on average, you get around 45% as the 50th percentile. Now, this is a really poor score because it's also a multiple choice test. Okay, so if I was to just close my eyes and blindly select answers, I'll be getting around 25% as a given because it's multiple choice. Okay, but there are many people that really struggle with verbal reasoning, and they think that it's because of the time limit, and which indeed is the case. Okay, but this just leads to a lot more, questions, misconceptions, and wrong teachings being taught. So before I actually go through how to do verbal reasoning properly, I'll go through some very common misconceptions that is being taught out there. So please beware and don't follow the wrong techniques. Okay, now, if you take a look at verbal reasoning down here, so in this passage, you can see that it's quite chunky, and that's very characteristic of verbal reasoning. Okay, your passage might vary from a range of topics which you will have no idea whatsoever, so don't bother trying to prepare for the topics that may pop up beforehand. Okay, this is not a test in high school or university that you can prepare for the actual content. Every passage that is given to you, it is assumed that this is new information that you have to interpret. Okay, so the passage is often going to be something like a research article or a newspaper article, but sometimes it can be something like a diary. Now this here is a typical verbal reasoning question. You're always given one passage followed by 4 questions. There's 28.6 seconds per question. So when you times that by 4 for the 4 questions, okay, you're given just under 2 minutes to read through the passage and answer each of the 4 questions. Now this is extremely time intensive. So a lot of people, they're very keen to just jump straight to the question in order to try and answer them. Okay, however, our techniques is actually centered on doing the question properly. So we need to properly dissect how to actually answer the question. And to do that, you have to read through the passage properly. Okay, you have to be able to understand the information in the passage and what it's telling you. And the quicker you understand that, okay, the quicker you can answer all the questions. Okay, so a very common misconception is that people say, well, can't you just read the question first, look for keywords, and then scan through the text in order to answer the question? Well, the answer is yes, you could do that, but it is slower. How is it actually slower? Okay, it is slower because after you read through the questions, you scan through that text once. Then you read through the second question, and then you're scanning through the text again for the keywords. And then you do it for the third and fourth question, and altogether you are scanning through the passage 4 times in order to actually answer the question. Okay, so that is what most people do for this question type, and it's the most commonly taught technique for verbal reasoning. Unfortunately, this most commonly taught technique is completely wrong, and it has resulted in verbal reasoning being the worst scoring section in the UCAT. Okay, because if you have to read through something 4 times in order to answer the questions, okay, you are definitely going to run out of time doing the UCAT. And we can see that from the averages in the UCAT. This section is the poorest scoring average with only 45%, even though it's a multiple choice test with 4 questions per 4 answer options per question. Okay, so this means that a lot of the people are doing verbal reasoning wrong. Okay, and in order to do it right, you'd have to only read through the passage once to answer all the questions. Okay, so reading through it once, reading through it 4 times, you guys know which one is quicker. Of course, it's reading through it just once. Okay, but you might be thinking, oh, but I don't have photographic memory. I can't remember every single word in this passage because it's about 300 words long. Okay, and that's a typical size of a passage as well. Okay, so how am I supposed to, read through it just once? If it's like I have to have photographic memory. Okay, now not quite. Okay, it's because the text is always in front of you, so it's not like you have to just remember it after the text is taken away and answer the questions without the passage given to you. Okay, so because the passage is always given to us, all we really need to do is understand where to answer the questions straight away after reading the question. And in order to do this, okay, we actually have come up with a technique in ICANN-MED to critically read the passage so that we can remember exactly where to find all the information to answer the question straight away. Okay, now another upside to this is it also helps you remember the actual contents of the passage as well, so that you don't really have to read through something more than once or twice. Now, this technique will rely a lot on this thing that we say, the subject followed by a description. Okay, so every single sentence will have a subject followed by a description. And you are meant to pick up all of these keywords the first time that you read through the passage. Okay, so which one is more important? Is it the subject or the description? Okay, and the subjects are normally your nouns, okay, because that's your subject. Okay, it's like a variable, a placeholder, a noun. Okay, and then you might be given any topic in the actual UCAT. Okay, and so you can't prepare for it. You have to only just read through the passage in order to actually understand the information about that topic. Okay, so this subject will change in the UCAT. What doesn't change are the description words. Okay, these description words are the keywords which will always be verbs, adjectives, okay, or prepositions. And these are the words that actually give meaning to the subject. They give you understanding in the passage. Okay, the subjects are just a variable X and Y that will change throughout all of the different passages that you're given in UCAT. Okay, but the key description words are the words that never change. So these are the words that you have to focus on, which will help you extremely in understanding the passage and answering the questions. Okay, so I'll go through the reading and show you how powerful it is to actually read properly the first time. Okay, and how much more efficient and effective it is as opposed to just reading the question first and then answering it. So pay a lot of attention here. Okay, now the first thing to take note of is the subject, whilst not important, you have to still know it in order to store all your description keywords. Okay, so a lot of people when they read, they just read left to right and they don't remember what they read. It's because they are not storing the proper information. They're not storing the subject followed by the description word. So first thing, what is the main subject in the sentence? So if you read the first sentence, dignity of risk refers to the idea that self-determination and the right to take reasonable risk are essential for dignity and self-esteem, and so should not be impeded by excessively cautious care. That's so many words. Okay, so what am I meant to actually, remember? Can you remember all 30 words? It's going to be tough. But if I was to say, just remember a few keywords, it will be a lot easier. Okay, so first, the main subject. The main subject of that first sentence is dignity of risk. Okay, so that's what the whole first sentence is about. And in fact, UCAT likes to break up their passage into paragraphs. So your first paragraph will usually be mostly about dignity of risk, and maybe even the following paragraphs as well. Okay, so dignity of risk, by far the main subject. So what is the description words for dignity of risk? Okay, now it is the verbs, adjectives, prepositions, but not all of the verbs, adjectives, prepositions. Take a look at what I highlighted. Right, take, for, not impeded by. So these are the main important description words in that first sentence. Okay, so dignity of risks is the right to take blah, for blah, not impeded by blah. Okay, so what was all the blahs for? The blahs are just these things that I'm putting in brackets. They are your minor subjects. Okay, so they're not the major subjects. They're just minor subjects to help describe your main subject. Okay, but how is it helping describe your main subject? It's through the keywords. Okay, so that's why it's really important to remember these keywords. Dignity of risks is the right to take risks for dignity. Okay, and it's not impeded by excessively cautious caregivers. Okay, so you have to really focus on remembering the keywords. Okay, and I'll show you why when I answer the questions a bit later on. Okay, now next one. It applies to adults who are under care, such as disabled people and people with mental health problems. So people who read left to right, they often don't remember or don't know what that sentence is talking about. So you always have to stop and be like, well, what is that? What is the main subject of that sentence? It just says it. So what does it refer to? It refers to dignity of risks. So this second sentence is still talking about dignity of risk. What is it trying to describe about dignity of risks? Here is that description word, applies. It's trying to describe the applications of dignity of risks. And it describes the applications through this whole sentence down here. Oh yeah, it's adults under care, such as disabled people and people with mental health problems. But remember, this is just a placeholder. Okay, it's just a minor subject. All you really need to remember is not all of this content, but just remember, oh yeah, that second sentence is about its applications. All right, third sentence, it, so again, it refers to dignity of risk. So it has also been applied to, so again, it's still talking about applications. So really, the description hasn't changed. You could have just merged the second and third sentence together and it would just tell you, and it's just talking about the applications of it. Okay, now, the next one, however, allowing people who are under care to take risks, which is the same thing as dignity of risks, so your subject has not changed. Okay, often comes into conflict. So now it's talking about the conflict that dignity of risks has with something else. With who? Oh, it's with the caregiver's duty of care. Okay, and it can be difficult to find a balance between competing considerations. So that second half of that sentence is the same as the first half. It's just conflict with the caregiver's duty of care, just reworded to re-emphasize the same thing. So you don't have to bother to commit that into memory. So you can see here, there are a lot of words that I did not highlight because it's just repeating the same point again. Okay, so some people may ask, well, why didn't you highlight the other verbs, adjectives, prepositions? And the answer is because it's not important. It's not important because I don't have to actually remember it to understand that entire sentence. So if there's a keyword that you didn't have to remember, but you can still recall that first sentence, or it doesn't affect the understanding of that sentence, then there's no point trying to commit it to memory. Like, for example, did you really have to remember the word reasonable in that first sentence? No. Okay, taking risks is the same thing as saying taking reasonable risks. That word reasonable is an adjective, but it didn't actually give you any extra understanding in the sentence. It didn't change the meaning of that sentence. So it's not a highlighted word, and largely it can just be taken out. So English is a very inefficient language. And here, what we're trying to do is we're trying to filter out all the inefficiencies, and we are trying to remember just the pure understanding and meaning and the pure message of the actual passage. And that's the key to remembering the keywords and answering the questions. Okay, now the second and third paragraph, you do exactly the same thing as the first. What is the main subject? So the main subject, overprotecting people with disabilities. So now this second subject, yes, it is still talking about dignity of risks, but more specifically, it is focusing on overprotecting people with disabilities. Okay, so it's focusing on this. What is it going to be talking about? Okay, it was talking about the causes of overprotecting people. Okay, so what does this overprotection actually cause? Okay, and then it causes a whole bunch of things that you don't have to commit into memory, because these are just placeholders, nouns that can be interchanged. Okay, but you need to know that this line talks about the causes for overprotecting people. The next one, the internalization of low expectations causes. Okay, so this here, internalization of low expectations, you might think, oh yeah, my subject has changed. No, it hasn't. It's just continuing on from the line before. Okay, so the line before, lowered expectations. So essentially you can just mush it into the same sentence, and this first and second sentence is still talking about the causes of overprotecting people with disabilities. Okay, and then the next line, because of this, the UN. Okay, so because of this, the UN. So because of this, what is it? The UN has incorporated, and you can see the words that I highlighted. What have they incorporated? It doesn't matter, it's just a noun. They incorporated dignity of risk into guiding principles of the Convention of the Right of Persons with Disabilities. You know, that's just a placeholder. It can be changed with anything else. The most important thing to know is that due to this overprotecting of people with disabilities, the UN has incorporated this concept into whatever that is, whatever that placeholder is. Okay, so it's important to know these words only. Now the next line, or paragraph, in elderly people. So the subject has changed. It's not talking about disabled people, it's talking about elderly people overprotection. So that's something you have to realize when you're reading. If you didn't realize the subject's changed, everything would just become a jumbled mess, and you won't know what you're trying to describe with your keywords. Okay, so that's why you need to know what the main subject is each time. Okay, can result. Oh, result. So here are the results of, which is kind of the same word as causes. It's just like a synonym. Okay, so it results in that stuff here, learned dependency and a decreased ability of self-care. Okay, and even if being overprotective helps them regain their physical independence by undermining their dignity and not allowing them to control their own daily living, this may cause them long-term psychological damage and a sense of low self-esteem. So really speaking, that whole sentence is just talking about the results and the causes of overprotection for elderly people. And there's no extra descriptions there. It's just a whole list of subjects, okay, that talk about the results or causes of overprotecting elderly people. So that's what that whole last paragraph is about. Okay, so we've just finished reading the text passage, and hopefully you only need to, so we are aiming to only read through the passage once to grab all of these keywords and remember these keywords. It's not too hard because a lot of the keywords are just repeated. See, like causes, results, okay, applies, and you only have 3 subjects, but it's kind of just one subject with just more specifications on that one subject. Okay, dignity of risk. Okay, overprotecting disabilities, overprotecting elderly. So there's not a lot you have to remember, but this is enough to actually answer the questions in the most efficient manner. Okay, so jumping down to the questions. Now, the question itself, if you have read through the passage properly, you can almost instantly answer the questions. Okay, how is that? Now, when you read the question, okay, do take note that the question also has, subject and description. Okay, so you need to match that with your passage's subject and description. Okay, so question 1 says, not allowing people under care to take risks. This is just another way to say overprotecting people that was mentioned in my actual passage. Okay, so I know I need to refer to this part of my passage because it's talking about the same subject. Okay, now I can specify even more by looking at, well, what keywords is in this question here? Does not cause them to develop. Now I'm looking for the causes for overprotection. I've got 4 answer options. 3 of them will be in my passage. 1 of them will not be in my passage, and that's my answer because it's asking for which one does not cause them to develop. So A, B, C, or D. So literally, I already know where I'm looking at. I'm looking at here and here because of the subject. I'm looking for the causes. So here, this sentence is about the causes for overprotecting people. And here it mentions low self-esteem and underachievement. So it causes low self-esteem. And take a look at my answer options. Yeah, that was in my passage, low self-esteem. And next one, because of their lowered expectations of themselves. Their lowered expectations of themselves. That's in my passage as well. And that's from like the first word, or the first keyword that appears, which is causes. Now you take a look at the next one. Disabled people to believe that they are less capable than others in similar situations. Okay, so that's not supporting C or D. Okay, now then you quickly jump down to here because you know that, well, results is a synonym for causes. Okay, so, and then you can see here, this results in learned dependency and a decreased ability for self-care. So yeah, high levels of dependency, that was supported by this area. So that's how you quickly do this question. 3 of these points are supported, so that means D has to be my answer, and it's not in my passage. Okay, so that's how you quickly do this question. It's because you can immediately narrow down where in the passage you can answer the question. And for a lot of people, these actually become trigger words to help you remember the minor subjects as well. Okay, so some people don't even have to refer back to the passage again to take a look at that list of minor subjects. They can just answer it if they can remember the list of minor subjects. But you don't have to commit this to memory. Okay, you didn't even have to read through it the first time when you read through the passage. You could have just highlighted all these words, okay, and then not read anything else. And then when the question asks for it, only then do you read through the specifics of the minor subjects in order to answer the question. And that's it. Now for the second question, it says, according to the passage, dignity of risk is relevant to all the people except. Okay, so what is this? What's the subject of this? It's talking about dignity of risk. Okay, so that's great. That's probably referring to my first paragraph. Okay, but not really restricted to only the first paragraph because the whole passage is literally about dignity of risks. It's just that it's specifically about subgroups in the second and third paragraph. Okay, now this is telling us with the keyword, who is it relevant to? Okay, so that's that keyword there. Okay, it's relevant to all the following people except. Okay, so relevant is the keyword. Okay, which keyword will I use to answer that? And that's the first keywords here and here in that paragraph, applies. So who it's relevant to is who it applies to. So that's why it's important to recognize these keywords because you can match it up really quickly. Okay, so it applies to adults who are under care, such as disabled and people with mental health issues. So there we go, disabled people, people with mental health problems. These two are ticked. Now how many left with two other points? Terminally ill or elderly. Okay, now the next one says it also applied to children, including those with disabilities. Okay, so no, I can't eliminate A or C just yet. So I've already finished the applications in that first paragraph, but now I can use the information in my second and third paragraph as well, because you remember what was the main subject for one of my paragraphs? It was elderly people. So it does talk about dignity or risks in elderly people. So hence elderly is ticked as well. So that's why it's super, super important to remember your main subjects and your keywords, because it's really quick to just tick these 3 points. Okay, if you didn't remember any of those, you'll be struggling going back to the passage, reading through it more than once, and that is just a waste of time. All right, now terminally ill is obviously the answer because it's not supported by the passage at all, whereas the other 3 are. Now the third question, dignity or risk can be hard to uphold. So dignity or risk, again, is my main subject. Why is it hard to uphold? So hard, okay, is the keyword. And we can see the only time where something was hard in the passage, okay, was when it mentioned the word conflict. Okay, so here it says it conflicts with the caregiver's duty of care. So that is literally my answer. If it was a short answer question, that's what I would write. So which of these answers is very close to the conflict with the caregiver's duty of care? So you take a look at A. Many people who are dependent on others do not like to take risks. No, that's not conflicting with the caregiver's duty of care. B, caregivers have a responsibility to protect the people under their care. There we go. Okay, that's why it's hard to uphold, because it conflicts with the caregiver's responsibility to protect the people under their care. That B is very much supported by this part of that passage. Okay, and as you can see, you can immediately know what the answer is just by looking at the keywords. So just to eliminate C and D, it is a very abstract concept, making it difficult to apply in practical situations. So again, yeah, that's not supported at all by that sentence or anywhere else in the passage. And then D, caregivers dislike it when people under their care insist on acting independently. So again, that's not supported by anywhere in that passage or in that sentence. All right, the last question now. According to the passage, overprotectiveness. Oh, so there's my subject again. Overprotectiveness can cause psychological damage. Okay, so here, when in my passage did it talk about overprotectiveness causing psychological damage? And and what are the reasons for it? Okay, so the reasons for long-term psychological damage, so there we go, it's down here. Okay, and here are the causes and the results of overprotectiveness, okay, in elderly people. So you'll have to use the information down here or the information up here, which tells us the causes for overprotectiveness, and match it with whichever one is in my answer options. Okay, so taking a very quick read, what are the causes of overprotectiveness? Low self-esteem, lowered expectations of themselves, internalization of so that's the same thing, low expectations, and being less capable, believing that they are less capable than other people in similar situations. Okay, and then this one, a learned dependency. Okay, so these are the points that you will use to match A, B, C, or D. So as long as these fulfill any of those points, it should be our answer. And in UCAT, there's only one answer. So let's take a look. A, it causes them to become emotionally attached to their caregivers. No, that's not one of those points. B, it causes them to feel that they're unable to manage daily tasks by themselves. Yes, that was one of those points. It was the learner dependency and decreased ability for self-care. Okay, so this is supported by my passage. Okay, and the next one, they are being treated unethically. That was not one of those 4 points. And the last one, they lose their skills and abilities through lack of use. Okay, now this one here might be a possible answer if B wasn't such a good answer, unable to manage daily tasks. Okay, so here it says that they lose their skills, which is a bit less supported by the passage. In the passage, it didn't actually say that they lost their skills. It just said that they became dependent on other people. So they had a decreased ability, not a loss of ability. Okay, so that's what you would be doing when you're tossing up between B and D in order to determine the better answer by seeing which one is better represented by the actual sentence in the passage. Okay, so because it says lose their skills, that part is not supported by the passage. So B is the better answer. So that's it for verbal reasoning. Okay, but it's only the tip of the iceberg because we've got many other techniques to help you become more proficient in finding these key words, such as the shorthand, solution reviews worksheet, glossaries, conditioning techniques. Okay, so there's a lot of more resources that we have that we can give you. Okay, and last year we had people that perfected all of this technique using those tools, and we had about 5 people score the full 44 out of 44 marks. Okay, so that's an incredible result because remember, the average for verbal reasoning is only 45%. Okay, so this year we've seen more students and they have taken these techniques more seriously. And already there's a lot more people scoring full marks in the UCAT official mock tests that you see online. Okay, so that's it for me for verbal reasoning. I hope you've learned a lot because critical reading is extremely, extremely important. Before you go on to the next sections, you really have to perfect how to read the passage properly. Otherwise, if you can't do that, it really affects you getting the questions correct in future question types. Okay, so I look forward to seeing you in those future question types. So I hope you found this session very valuable, and I'll catch you all next time.